leviathan, focused on fulfilling in me the main and part of the older one, setting the bar, a beating frenzy when they're stopping, just forget where they are. You're in denial and you say you never wanted to taste, and you don't really wanna let the stimulant go to waste, so don't deny it, go on and try it. I'm looking forward to the moment when your mind will fall in love with the haze, the haze, the haze, the haze. The euphoric feeling is so right when it's used control of my inhibitions are left behind, and I know that reality really won't mind. I'm an eminent soul who desires to leave all that cares behind. The euphoric feeling is so right when it's used control of my inhibitions are left behind, and I know that reality really won't mind. I'm an eminent soul who desires to.
Welcome, everyone, to the Kentucky Kid. I'm your host, Kelly Berry, and interesting song choice, I think, considering the whole Alex Rodriguez scandal with the PEDs and everything else that he did. And goodness gracious, I mean, the guy is apparently he's still going to sue the MLB, the MLB Players Union, and I have an interesting, almost double standard on this whole steroid debate. It's actually not a double standard, but it appears to be a double standard whenever I first illustrate it. On one hand, I side with the integrity of the game. I mean, I don't like it when guys cheat to get to the top, because I'm not a cheating guy. I prefer guys to get to the top of their professions, regardless of what it is. In this case, Major League Baseball, whether it's athletics or anything else, I prefer them to do it the right way. I prefer them to do it the right way. That's on one hand. But on the other hand, Colin Cowherd from ESPN Radio, and, you know, the ESPN networks in general, he does a lot more than just radio stuff. He had an interesting point a couple of years ago when this whole PED, when Bud Selig basically launched, Bud Selig being the commissioner of Major League Baseball, basically launched his campaign against PEDs full throttle. And Colin Cowherd said, look, and I'm not quoting here because I don't remember the direct quote, but he said basically, if you were in the same position as these athletes and you could get better at what you do by just injecting a little something into your arm, would you not do it? He said, if I could become a better announcer by just popping a pill that would take me from the level that I was at to a level beyond what I would ever be able to get just based on natural talent alone. Would anyone in that situation, with the resources necessary to take these kinds of drugs, and it takes a lot of money, it takes a hell of a lot of money, would you not do it? And then you have the whole Hall of Fame battle where a 600-plus home run guy, a 660 home run plus guy in Barry Bonds is not in the Hall of Fame and doesn't get anywhere close. And then you have Roger Clemens, who is arguably one of the best pitchers of all time. Not even close. Their voting percentages are going down, and it doesn't look like they will ever be even considered remotely for the Hall of Fame. But when they were playing the game, they were one of, if not the best people at their position. Not just for the game at that time, but perhaps all time. And yet these guys probably don't have a shot at this point in the Hall of Fame just because they did it the wrong way. The number one thing that I want Major League Baseball to do from here on out is this, okay? And like I said, I kind of straddle the fence on the steroid issue itself because honestly, If I was put in the same situation, I don't know if I would inject or not. I probably would. Just to be perfectly honest, I probably would inject just to reach my fullest potential and be the best that I could possibly be. But regardless of what your personal take is, or what my personal take is, the number one thing that Major League Baseball and Bud Selig and the front office has to do, the number one thing beyond and above all else, is they have to be consistent. They have to be consistent. If you are going to go out and lynch Alex Rodriguez's legacy, and you're not going to, and I know that Bud Selig doesn't do all of the Hall of Fame voting, but if the Hall of Fame is going to basically say that we are not going to let in anyone with, PED usage, and I reference Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens and even Pete Rose. If you are going to do that to these guys, you have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it. You cannot go back. You cannot undo what you were doing. It would be like if the NFL just came out and said, you know what, we don't give a damn about safety anymore. And just went back to the NFL of old where you were allowed to target receivers and basically murder the heck out of the quarterback. And just defenders got away with basically doing whatever they wanted to outside of grabbing the face mask. Okay, you have to be consistent. That's what I want Major League Baseball to do. If their goal is to clean up their image, then clean up your image and just do it, and do it consistently. And know going in that it is going to be a very, very long, drawn-out process that honestly probably will not end with Alex Rodriguez. I have the feeling that this is only the beginning. This is only the beginning. Because there are so many other people like Alex Rodriguez with the money that it takes, with the resources that it takes, and with the desire to be good that it takes to inject PEDs, even if you are scared of needles, which according to that 60-minute interview, apparently he was, which I just find kind of funny. A guy that has stuff stuck in his arm all the time is afraid of needles. But anyway, that's beside the point. To continue the show today, we're actually going to continue with some breaking news I mentioned in a couple of shows prior to this one. I believe it was the first, or it was either the first or the second show of the new year. So it was either the last one or the one before that. Doesn't really matter. Anyway, the point is, I mentioned in one of the shows that I've done here in the new year that I was going to keep you updated with any new coaching hires or rumors therein. Well, we've had a new coaching hire, and it was Ken Whisenhunt, or Whisenhunt? Yeah, I believe that's how you say the name. He was hired. That's not really a surprise to me. A little bit of a surprise where he went, though. I figured that he was going to go to Detroit. Detroit had the most offensive weapons at the disposal of whoever it is that they hire. I felt like wherever Ken Whisenhunt wanted to go, he could pretty much go. He got hired at Tennessee. Now, Tennessee has a very good team, at least per the job vacancies. I mean, if you're going to compare Tennessee to the likes of Minnesota and Cleveland, then yeah, Tennessee is a pretty ideal landing spot. And really, I mean, they went 7-9 this past year. They're not a bad team. They have Chris Johnson, a franchise running back. They have Ryan Fitzpatrick, a quarterback who, in my opinion, is fairly underrated. A couple of good wide receiver options, Kenny Brett being one of them. They also have Delaney Walker as a tight end, a decent offensive line, pretty good defense, and a decent special teams as well. It's just they lacked consistency this season. Now, one interesting part about this hire is that, honestly, Ryan Fitzpatrick and Phillip Rivers are pretty comparable in their styles of play and the struggles that they've had. Ryan Fitzpatrick is kind of like what Phillip Rivers was 3 or 4 years ago. He's a guy that has a great arm, decent vision, inaccurate at times, but his number one problem is decision making. It's decision making. Ryan Fitzpatrick forces a lot of passes. And Phillip Rivers had the same problem. Ken Whisenhunt, albeit it took him a couple of years, but he corrected that and made Phillip Rivers into one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league. Okay, the guy led the nation in completion percentage. He was one of the best in QBR. He led a team that really, when you think about it, San Diego, right state, wrong team. San Diego's not that good of a team. Okay, they have a decent running back in Ryan Matthews. They have an okay offensive line. They don't have a lot of weapons. Their defense is sketchy at best. And yet Phillip Rivers led them to a 9-7 record. They had to win a bunch of the games at the latter part of the season, including a win at Denver to get into the playoffs, and came pretty darn close to beating Denver again. The score was 24-17. I'll get to that recap here in a minute. If Ken Whisenhunt can work the same magic with Ryan Fitzpatrick as he did with Phillip Rivers, then Tennessee's going to be a good team. The number one thing, though, for the Tennessee organization is patience. Okay, you have to give Ken Whisenhunt time. He's the kind of guy that is going to improve, at least according to what we saw in San Diego, he is going to improve your offense because he was an offensive coordinator. He is going to improve your offense with time. But improving a team is not something that can just be done overnight. Okay, it takes time. But I think it's a very good hire. It's a very good hire. It makes sense. If I was Ken Whisenhunt, I would have gone to Detroit, but Tennessee's a pretty good option as well. Some very good offensive weapons, a much better defense, I believe, than Detroit has. So, the building blocks are there. I just think it will take a little bit of time for him to succeed, at least as up to his potential as a head coach at Tennessee. Some other coaching hires, both in the NFL. Actually, there haven't been any more coaching hires in the NFL, but some coaching rumors in the NFL. Numerous rumors are linking the Ravens offensive coordinator, Jim Caldwell, to the Detroit job. And that would be another hire that would make sense. Because what have the Ravens done over the last, well, in Jim Caldwell's case, over the last year and a half? They've had balance between their running attack and their passing attack. That's something that Detroit needs. Okay, Detroit has a tendency, and I understand the tendency because you have guys like Matthew Stafford at quarterback, Calvin Johnson as wide receiver, Nate Burleson as a wide receiver. You have a very good passing game, but they have a tendency to fall in love with the passing game and forget to run the ball. And even Calvin Johnson, if you remember, I believe it was last year in the offseason, said we need to run the ball more. Okay, when your number one wide receiver, not just on your team, but in the entire country, says that your team needs to run the ball more, you may want to pay attention. That's what Jim Caldwell brings. Jim Caldwell brings a balance. He brings a balance, which is something that Detroit desperately needs. And I think that hire would make sense if anything comes out of it, because like I said, right now it's just rumors. Some other coaching hire news, this coming out of college football. James Franklin, officially the head man at Penn State. I broke that down in the last show. If you want my official opinion on that, you can watch the last show, Kentucky Kid, January 10th, 2014. Just a quick summary, I think it makes perfect sense. If you want to know why, like I said, go back to the January 10th show for my full opinion on that one. Some local news. Louisville gets a defensive coordinator to complement Bobby Petrino. This probably one of the smartest hires that Tom Jurek has ever done. And that is saying a lot. Okay, he brought in, obviously, Bobby Petrino twice. I believe he was athletic director when Rick Pitino was hired. Look at what he's done with the athletics department. You know this guy is smart. Okay? But he brought in Georgia's defensive coordinator, Todd Grantham. Here's why this makes sense. Okay? Now, Georgia's defense this past year was not that good. You know why they weren't that good? Because the year before that, they lost 8 guys off of their defense. And if I'm not mistaken, 7 of them went to the NFL. 7. 7 of your 11 starters went to the NFL. Got drafted. Okay? So basically, you had 2/3 of what NFL teams saw as capable NFL players. And some of those capable NFL players are going to be pretty darn good NFL players. Like Alec Ogletree at the Rams, for example. Or, who was the linebacker that went to Pittsburgh? Jones went to the Steelers. I mean, you had some stars on that defense. This guy knows how to develop talent on the defensive end. He is a smart mind on the defensive end, a phenomenal compliment to Bobby Petrino, who is a phenomenal offensive mind. So you have one of the best offensive minds in the game and one of the best defensive minds in the game on the same team. Case in point, okay, that 2011 defense I was talking about, the one where they lost all those starters, they were 5th in the entire nation in total defense. Okay, this guy knows what he's doing. That's a phenomenal hire. So you already have Bobby Petrino. Now you have a great defensive mind. The future is bright for the University of Louisville. Jeff Brom is the new head coach at Western Kentucky. Was the offensive coordinator under Bobby Petrino. Another hire that makes sense. Okay? I think that Western Kentucky, at least right now, they needed to go with somebody who's been at the program. And given the fact that Brom was able to study under Bobby Petrino, not just at his days at Western Kentucky, mind you, but he was the quarterback's coach under Bobby Petrino at the University of Louisville when his brother, Brian Brom, was quarterback. So this guy has studied under Bobby Petrino. I'm sure he has a phenomenal offensive mind of his own. He's now the head coach at the Hilltoppers. That's a hire that makes sense. Another offensive hire that makes sense. Lane Kiffin, the offensive coordinator at the University of Alabama. Say what you want to about Lane Kiffin. I know he's immature. I know he's probably not head coaching material. Okay? But get this. He is a phenomenal, that's a buzzword today, but he is a phenomenal offensive mind. In 2012, at USC when he was the head coach, they had the 41st total offense, 41st best offense. And they had a great rushing and passing attack, okay? Averaged 282 passing yards per game, 151 rushing yards per game. The year before, 2011, 21st in total offense, 457 yards per game. Again, great balance. Passing, 298. Rushing, 163. 16th in scoring that year, 35.8 points per game. Okay, in the Pac-12, those defenses aren't complete jokes. So he comes under Nick Saban. He's now the offensive coordinator under Nick Saban. What does Nick Saban champion in offense? He champions balance. Look what they did. Look at all of Nick Saban's years. I don't have to pick out one. Okay, you've seen Alabama play. Before that, LSU. This guy champions balance. This guy champions balance. Look at the great running backs that have come out of the University of Alabama. Okay, you have Yeldon, who, if I'm not mistaken, is still there. You have Trent Richardson, who, yeah, is in a speed bump right now at the NFL, but so what? He's going to be a good pro eventually. Give him time. Mark Ingram. Eddie Lacy. I mean, come on. That is a phenomenal track record, and that's only been in the last, 4 years. Plus, you have quarterbacks like Greg McElroy and A.J. McCarron. Who wouldn't love to work with that? Balance. Balance. It's what Nick Saban champions, and that's what he's got now. So as far as the potential candidates that are left for coaching hires in the NFL right now, probably the 4 best, and it really depends on what you want. Okay, if you want an offensive-minded head coach, Adam Gase, offensive coordinator at Denver, is probably a good selection. Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator at San Francisco. If you want a defensive mind, Mike Zimmer, defensive coordinator at Cincinnati. By the way, his name is being linked to Minnesota's head coaching job, and I believe he has his second interview with the Minnesota Vikings coming up. And, just like any other job, if you get a second interview, your chances are greatly improved. And then if you want a guy with previous coaching experience, Mike Munchak. I mean, he went 7-9 with Tennessee. Tennessee is not the best team in the world. They're certainly not the worst team in the world, but they're not the best team, and he wasn't given a lot of time. If you wanted to reach Jim Schwartz, but if I'm an NFL GM or owner or whoever in that franchise does the hiring of the head coach, I am very wary. Very wary. Say that 5 times fast. I am very wary of drafting Jim Schwartz. And the reason why is because he wasn't able to win at Detroit. Okay, Detroit had, in all likelihood, Detroit has probably the most talented offense in the NFL. You have Matthew Stafford, who's a B to B plus quarterback. Reggie Bush, phenomenal situational running back. You have Calvin Johnson, the best wide receiver in the league, hands down. You have Nate Burleson, a great compliment. You have a decent offensive line. You have Brandon Pettigrew, who's one of the most underrated tight ends in the country. Add that to the fact that you have one of the best defensive lines in the country, with 2 interior guys in Ndamukong Suh and Nick Fairley, who are only going to get better. And yet, he was not able to win with that. He wasn't even able to go to the playoffs, much less win his own division, when Aaron Rodgers was hurt for so long and Jay Cutler was hurt for so long. So if you're not able to win with that kind of a scenario, I don't see why you should be hired. At least not this year. Now, next year, somebody might say, you know what, at least he knows the ropes of the business. He may not be that great at it, but if we need a head coach and nobody else is interested in coming here, sure, bring in Jim Schwartz. But I have a feeling that it's going to turn into one of those things like Mike Singletary when he coached at San Francisco and just utterly bombed the whole thing, where if you can't win with that, nobody's going to hire you and we are never going to hear from you again. That's what I feel like is going to happen to Jim Schwartz. I don't know. I could be wrong. But honestly, if you're not able to win with those cards, come on. You probably don't deserve this job in all likelihood. Speaking of the NFL, great divisional round. For 2 reasons. Number one, all of the games were phenomenal. At least depending on what you were looking for or expecting. Second reason, I was right on all 4 of them. And look, I pat myself on the back a lot on this show. First off, it's my show, and I can do what I want. But second off, I am not right that often when calling NFL games. In fact, I am pretty terrible at predicting the NFL. I have told several people, including my brother, I have told my brother this. I said, look, if I ever say that I am going to bet on NFL games, or if I am even thinking about betting on NFL games, I have told him to punch me in the testicles. Because I am so bad at it. So bad. So anytime that I actually get a series of games right, yeah, I'm patting myself on the back. Good job, Kelly, because it's probably not going to happen ever again. But in saying that, I'm 7-1 in the playoffs this year, and it befuddles me because I completely bombed the season. I predicted 2 teams to go 0-16. I'm not even going to tell you who they are because they didn't do anything close to that. I'll give you a hint. One team almost made the playoffs in the AFC. I'm not going to say anything more than that. But anyway, I predicted all 4 games correctly. That's the point. But what you actually want to hear is what actually happened. So I'll get to that here in a second. First off, the 49ers and the Panthers game. This game was interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, at the beginning, it was just what we all expected. Another defensive slugfest. Just old school, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. It looked like Big Ten football out there. It really did. Just running game, defense is flying around everywhere. The offense is not able to do anything. But it was also interesting for this reason. This game's beginning paralleled almost identically the San Francisco and Green Bay game. Let me explain, okay? First off, San Francisco begins the scoring with 2 field goals to take a 6-0 lead in the first quarter. That happened in both Carolina and at Green Bay. Then the opponent responds in the second quarter with a touchdown to take a 7-6 lead. Okay, Aaron Rodgers threw a pass to Jordy Nelson in the wild card game, and Cam Newton fired a pass to Steve Smith in the game with Carolina. Then San Francisco responds and ultimately takes a 13-10 lead at the half. I think the key so far to the San Francisco 49ers playoff success this year, and really the last 3 years, has been the defense, especially in the second half this year. Okay, against Green Bay, this defense gave up 10 points, did not force a turnover, but gave up 10 points and 141 total yards. Against Carolina, 0 points, they forced a turnover, and they gave up 145 yards, which that number is a little bit misleading because there was that big pass to Ted Ginn Jr. at the end of the game, and it was virtually meaningless. It was like 35 yards, and San Francisco's defense was like, whatever, screw it, run out of bounds. I don't care. There's 2 seconds left in a game that's a 13-point lead, so whatever Ted Ginn Jr. did at that point in time wasn't really going to make a difference. So they really gave up about 110 meaningful yards. The Panthers all season, they've struggled scoring the ball. And honestly, it's not that their overall scoring was that bad. I believe they scored 366 total points in the regular season. That's not bad. That's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. But when the chips were really down and their offense had to score, they failed. more often than not. Okay? Case in point. In the second half, in games that they won, Carolina scored 13.7 points on average in each of those second halves. In their losses, and they lost 5 times this year, in their losses, 4.6, including 3 shutouts, one of which was against San Francisco. Now, I think Carolina has a lot of upside, okay? They have a young linebacker in Luke Kuechly who is just absolutely phenomenal. Phenomenal. Thomas Davis, another great linebacker. If they can find a way to get Greg Hardy to re-sign, oh my goodness, what a pass rusher he is. And then you have some offensive weapons like D'Angelo Williams, who just refuses to age. You have Cam Newton, who's obviously a formidable opponent to any defense. You have Steve Smith, who it's up in the air as to how many years he has left. And I think they would probably do themselves a favor by getting a wide receiver in the draft. That's just my opinion. But the next step for this team is to have some consistency on the offensive end, because you cannot expect your defense to constantly win games for you. You just can't. Okay? They were 0-4 when they gave up 20 or more points. Now, if that number was 30 or more, or 35 or more, or heaven forbid even 40 or more, I could understand. But 20 points is not a big accomplishment for an offense in a game. It's really not. Okay? If you're Cam Newton, if I'm Cam Newton, and I'm considered to be the franchise quarterback of this team, and my team goes 0-4 when the defense gives up 20 or more points. Well, you know what that says about a franchise quarterback is that when the chips are down, he's not able to score. And it's not like 20 points is that big of an accomplishment. Okay, I'm not saying that Cam Newton should not be the franchise quarterback. He is, definitely, no questions asked. I'm not saying he's not a phenomenal talent. He is. But the next step is offensive consistency, because you cannot win games, and they proved it this year, when your offense scores 4.6 points per game in 5 losses in the second half, and your team goes 0-4 when your defense gives up 20 points or more in a game. Now, with that said, there are some interesting positive takeaways from this game. Jim Harbaugh, first coach to get to the conference championship game in each of his first 3 seasons. He lost in a heartbreaker. I believe it was the year before last. Kyle Williams had all of those special teams fumbles. They lost to the New York Giants. Then last year they win to get to the Super Bowl, and they end up losing by 3 to the Super Bowl, or in the Super Bowl. And again, we're back. He's done it with 2 different quarterbacks. Alex Smith the first year, and halfway through the second year, and then Colin Kaepernick for the last year and a half. What about Anquan Boldin's day? My God, 8 catches, 136 yards. He had almost 70% of his team's receiving yards in this game. Because the entire team had 196 passing yards. Okay, that's what Colin Kaepernick threw for. And 136 of them were to Anquan Boldin. One last thing before I get done with this game, though. I've noticed that both Colin Kaepernick and Cam Newton are fairly inaccurate quarterbacks at times. They're streaky passers. Okay, that's That's not necessarily a terrible thing because, after all, they're pretty young guys. Okay? Cam Newton has been in the league for about 4 years. Colin Kaepernick's in his second year. Okay, you can forgive an inaccurate pass every now and then from a young guy. Heck, even Peyton Manning throws inaccurate passes. But the difference is this, okay? Cam Newton tends to miss where? And Colin Kaepernick tends to miss where? Colin Kaepernick tends to miss low and away. If you are going to miss low and away. And the reason why is because that's where the defender usually is not. Okay, he throws it away from the defender. So if he's going to miss, it's either where his guy can get it or nobody can get it. Where does Cam Newton usually miss? High, which leads to tips, which leads to interceptions, and behind. But really high. He misses high a lot. A lot. That's another thing that I think Cam Newton should shore up. Okay, just settle down in the pocket. You're fine. Okay, you're 6'5" and you weigh like 260 pounds. You're fine. Just settle down in the pocket, okay? I'm not dogging on him too much because, after all, he's a pretty young guy still. And I'm a fairly patient fan. But in order for Carolina to take that next step, like I said, they need to score more consistently. Cam Newton needs to figure out where to miss, or just not miss, either one. But the first is more likely than the second, so just figure out where to miss. As far as the Colin Kaepernick dance is concerned, I'm just going to be perfectly honest here. Okay, when he did the Superman dance that Cam Newton usually does, where it looks like he pulls back a shirt or whatever, does the Clark Kent changing thing, I don't care. I don't care. This is a story that should not exist. And the reason why is because he got a touchdown. Newsflash, if you get a touchdown, you can dance. You can dance. You can rub it in. That's the point of a touchdown dance. It's to celebrate what you did and in the process make the other team feel bad for letting you get there. Duh. Wow. That was monumentally just duh. Okay, look. If a guy gets into the end zone and he does your dance, as a defense, you know what you say? Hey, we're not going to let him get in there again. That's motivation. If you're a quarterback and he did your dance on your home turf, guess what? Go and score and do the dance. And maybe do the bicep kiss. And you all can just be mirror images of each other the rest of the game. I don't care. I don't care. What Colin Kaepernick did not affect me in any way whatsoever. Because you know what? If you get that pissy because you let him into the end zone, that's your own problem. That's your own problem. If you don't want him to do your dance, don't let him score. Or don't have a dance. It's that simple. The other NFC game, the Saints and the Seahawks. Another performance as expected, basically, except for a few statistical variants. Okay, the Seahawks ended up winning this game 23-15. The Saints were unable to stop Marshawn Lynch. He ran the ball 28 times for 140 yards, 2 touchdowns. Those two things were expected. First off, the Seahawks winning. Second off, Marshawn Lynch not repeating his struggle earlier this season when they played the Saints in the same venue. Here's a couple of things that were not expected. The Saints outgained the Seahawks 409-277. The Saints had nearly twice as many first downs as the Seahawks, 25-13. The Saints had slightly more time of possession. The Saints nearly tripled the Seahawks in passing yards, 301 to 103. But here was the killer. The Saints were -1 in turnovers. And this same problem that they've had all season long with two different kickers. Missed field goals. Shane Graham missed 2 of them. Granted, they were from 45 and 48. I get that the conditions weren't that great. But you're a playoff kicker on the road in a hostile environment. Your team requires you to put up points. And he let them down. And when you factor in the fact that the Saints defense was not able to force a turnover, and you had 2 missed field goals, and you put up 0 points in the first half, yeah, you needed your kicker to come through. Would it have made a difference in the result of the game, win or loss? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Can't hurt. It can't hurt. Because when you look at 2 missed field goals, you cannot just take the score and say, oh, they lost by 8, 2 missed field goals, that's only 6. It wouldn't have made a difference in the end result. First off, field position. Okay, if you miss a field goal, then the other team gets the ball basically from where you kicked it. That's the first thing. Okay, so if he hits the field goal, they get the ball from wherever the kickoff is returned to, on average, say the 25, 26-yard line. But if they miss, then given the fact where he was kicking it from, Seattle starts both of those drives around the 50. So already you have a 60-yard swing in field position. Plus, there's the idea of momentum, okay? A field goal does wonders for momentum. Because if you are an offense and you get the ball to a certain point on the field but then get stopped, and your field goal kicker goes out and hits, you have the confidence as an offense that you do not have to get a touchdown every single possession in order to score. That you can get the ball to a certain point, and your kicker can go out and kick the ball through the uprights. But if he misses, then your offense feels like it has to literally get the ball into the end zone to score. And if that's not the case, at least get the ball 10, 20, 30 yards further down the field. And if that happens, your offense feels like it has to do more. And if your offense feels like it has to do more, then you are setting yourself up for more mistakes. Didn't really happen in this game necessarily, as Drew Brees did not have an interception, but it adds pressure. It adds pressure. It also adds pressure to the defense, because the defense feels like it has to stop the opponent's offense more often. And guess what? It backs them up into holes. It puts them in a back-to-the-wall scenario because they are starting at midfield. Whereas if you hit the field goal, they would be starting at around the 25. It also changes, and this is the most obvious, but it changes the confidence of the kicker. It changes the confidence of the kicker. So it changes the amount of confidence that the entire team has. Not to mention that field goals can silence a crowd, which was much needed, especially in the early going of that game. My God, those Seattle fans are crazy. They are nuts. It silences the crowd. It adds more pressure to the other team. So 2 missed field goals means a hell of a lot more than just 6 points. Now, like I said, it may have made a difference in the win-to-loss column. It may have not. I don't know. But it certainly couldn't have hurt. So the Seahawks advanced to the NFC Championship game. Now, I'll preview the Saints and Seahawks in the next show before this weekend, but I do want to say this. I'm leaning toward the Seahawks winning because when the 49ers came to town last time, the 49ers were not able to do anything on offense. And they were barely able to stop Seattle on defense. And the Seahawks ended up winning 29-3. In saying that, though, I'm hesitant because the Seahawks offense has struggled. They punted on 5 straight possessions in the second half before scoring finally a touchdown late in the fourth quarter of the game against New Orleans. Russell Wilson has looked awful of late. He only had 103 yards passing in this game. Okay? And it's not just been this game. It's been the last couple of weeks that he has looked bad. He has looked bad, at least compared to what his normal self is. Now, he has yet to make that critical mistake to cost his team a game, but against an offense like San Francisco's, with Michael Crabtree back, he's probably going to have to do more than just throw for 103 yards for them to get a win. That's just my guess. Now, in saying that, San Francisco also poses some concerns. They are not going to be able to get away with leaving points on the table by kicking field goals against Seattle. You have to punch the ball into the end zone to beat Seattle. Okay, case in point. When San Francisco beat Seattle at Candlestick Park, they only settled for a field goal once, and they only won by 1. San Francisco has 20 total points in 2 meetings against Seattle this year. They are going to have to score more than that, probably in this game alone. Colin Kaepernick cannot make a critical mistake. He has got to punch the ball into the end zone. They have got to get a touchdown, in my opinion, in the first quarter just to get this crowd out of the game, even if it's just for a little bit. The defense has to play superbly. Okay, you have to keep the game close. You have to force Russell Wilson into a mistake. Now, like I said, I'll preview that game. I'll reveal who I think is going to win that game coming up in the show later on this week. Moving on, though, to the AFC, the Colts and the Patriots. This was probably the worst game. Actually, it's not even close. It was the worst game of the playoffs, at least in this round. Bill Belichick had a funny quote. I believe it was in the postgame show, the postgame interview. Said, quote, "Whatever we have to do to win is fine by me." That immediately made me start thinking of Spygate. Just, whatever we have to do is fine by me. Run the ball, pass the ball, film the other team's play calls. But anyway, just I respect Bill Belichick, but that was just too easy. It was too much to pass up. But his team played phenomenally against the Colts. Okay, LeGarrette Blount, 4 rushing touchdowns. They won by 21. The final score was 43-22. And Tom Brady did not even complete a touchdown pass. The last time he did not complete a touchdown pass in the playoffs, you have to go back to 2011 against Baltimore. Ironically, they won that game too, 23-20. Maybe the secret for New England's success is Tom Brady not, never mind. I'm not even going to pretend like that's a legitimate response. But anyway, they did not need Tom Brady to complete a touchdown pass. 2 big stats in this game that really, really just stood out to me. Number 1, time of possession. And a couple of NFL or football experts have been trying to label this as the most overrated stat in the game. No, it's not. No, it's not. Okay, you go out and you ask a defensive player. Because you know what's funny? Is that most people that say that time of possession is an overrated stat are offensive players. Offensive players don't give a damn about time of possession. They just care about how much they score. Defensive players definitely care about time of possession because it's much harder to play defense than offense. Okay, you don't see a lot of offensive players with their hands on their knees at the end of the game. You see a lot of defensive players with their hands on their knees at the end of the game. So go out if you think that time of possession is overrated. Go out and ask some defensive player in football, I don't care what level it is, preferably above Pee-wee, but ask a player on defense what they think. Is the time of possession stat overrated? See what they say. I dare you. But the time of possession in this game, 35 minutes for New England, 25 minutes for Indianapolis. Another stat, in addition to that, Indianapolis, 4 turnovers. New England, 0. Now, I think that Andrew Luck is a phenomenal quarterback. I think he was obviously the best choice for Indianapolis. I think they made the right decision when they cut Peyton Manning and got Andrew Luck. But in order for Andrew Luck to take the next step in his player development, he has got to get better in the playoffs and in big games. In the playoffs, he only completes 55% of his passes. He does throw for 354 yards, but he has 6 touchdowns in the postseason, 7 interceptions, including 4 against New England. You can't throw 4 interceptions in Foxborough and expect to win. Okay, he barely won throwing 3 at home. To add to that, Indianapolis this year, in 2 postseason games, their team has 8 turnovers. 7 of them Andrew Luck interceptions, but 8 turnovers. Time of possession, they have 47 minutes and 27 seconds. Their opponents, 72 minutes, 33 seconds. Their defense has given up 932 yards in those 2 combined games, which, if my math is right, that's 466 yards per game, and 384 accumulative yards on the ground, which another quick math is, let's see, math class, don't fail me now, 192. 192. And that number is skewed because Jamal Charles was hurt in most of the game against Kansas City. That number would be even greater if he didn't get hurt. So Andrew Luck has to get more consistent, more reliable in the postseason. And the Colts defense has to improve. Okay, they have to be able to get off the field. Speaking of defenses that needed to get off the field, the Denver Broncos defensive unit had to be utterly sick of the media this past week when they heard that they could not stop the run, that they could not get off the field, that San Diego had the ability to run all over them and stay on the field and score points, because that's what they did in the last 2 meetings. In the last 2 meetings, San Diego's offense, in the 28-20 win that Denver had at San Diego, San Diego's offense went 7 of 16 on third down, had 38 minutes and 3 seconds time of possession. In the 27-20 loss in Denver, the Chargers offense went 6 of 12 on third down. They had 38 minutes and 49 seconds time of possession. So we were to expect the same old in the postseason. And the only way that Denver was going to win was if Peyton Manning came through in a big way and Wes Welker changed the game. Denver's offense had to win this game because Denver's defense sure as hell wasn't. And look what happened. Denver's defense held the Chargers scoreless in the first half. Surrendered only 4 third down conversions on 12 attempts. They got off the field. They were only on the field for 24 minutes and 33 seconds. They gave up 259 total yards and only 65 rushing yards. Now, San Diego, you might say, oh, but Ryan Matthews was hurt. Cry me a river. Everybody's hurt at this time of the year. Everybody. I'm not dogging Ryan Matthews. If you can't play, don't play. But for God's sake, don't whine and tell me that Ryan Matthews is hurt. Because everybody's hurt in the playoffs. Everybody. Nobody is 100%. Not even the kickers are 100% in the playoffs. Maybe that's why Shane Graham missed 2. But we can't help but look ahead to Denver and New England. And more specifically, to Peyton Manning versus Tom Brady. I believe I saw a stat that Tom Brady has won 10 of their 14 meetings against each other. Head-to-head matchups. But Peyton Manning got his first win against Phillip Rivers. That monkey is off his back in the postseason. First playoff win against Phillip Rivers. Peyton Manning, I'm sure, is wanting to even the score in the postseason with Tom Brady. He's 1-2 against him. And what does Peyton Manning say? Good old Peyton Manning. Politically correct responses. This is a game between 2 very good teams, the Denver Broncos and the New England Patriots. Bull crap. Because you know deep down in number 18's mind, he is thinking, I am coming for you, Tom Brady, and I am going to get you. And I will reveal that prediction in the show upcoming. San Francisco, Seattle, third meeting of the year, Tom Brady versus Peyton Manning. Could we have not had better storylines in the Final Four in the conference championships in the NFL? I would be hard-pressed to find one. I really would. Speaking of hard-pressed, I have been deliberating my way too early Final Four predictions. And to be honest, at this point, I am still not definitely certain as to which teams I would pick. I'll reveal those here in just a moment. But first, moving on to some college basketball tidbits for you. Because after all, the majority of the market around here absolutely loves college basketball. Can't say I blame them. I know I went on that little mini rant. I'm just sick of 24/7, 365 college basketball fans because there are other sports going on. But I love college basketball, especially this time of the year. Conference play starts. You get to look forward to the Kentuckys of the world playing Florida. You get to look forward to Duke playing North Carolina. Louisville played Memphis. Louisville plays Cincinnati. Those two teams go way back. Way back. I believe this is their third conference that they've shared, if I'm not mistaken. The Conference USA, the Big East, now the AAC. And if I'm not mistaken, Cincinnati is not following them into the ACC, which kind of saddens me, to be honest, because Louisville-Cincinnati is a big-time rivalry. But speaking of Louisville, they won 71-63 against Conference Pro SMU. SMU's got a decent basketball team, folks. Don't get too alarmed that Louisville just beat them by 7. Plus, there are some pretty darn good takeaways from this game. Luke Hancock is back. Luke Hancock is back. He had 19 of his 23 points. First off, he had 23 points in this game. 8 of 15 from the field, 4 of 9 from 3. But in addition to that, 19 came in the second half. Montrezl Harrell gives them a great low post presence. His second straight double-double. 12 points, 13 rebounds, had 4 blocks in the game. Russ Smith, 23 points, 7 assists compared to 4 turnovers. Louisville is now 9-0 when he has more assists than turnovers. Those are the 3 really good takeaways from this game. The bad one, Chris Jones. Not my cousin Chris Jones, who's a car salesman, but Chris Jones, the basketball player. In 4 straight games, and in 6 of the last 7, Chris Jones has failed to score 10 or more points. His only game in that stretch against Kentucky. He was the only reason that game was even a game in the first half. I've mentioned that before. In order for this team to reach his full potential, he has to take the pressure off of Russ Smith. Okay? Last year, I did not think Peyton Siva was a phenomenal athlete. I did not think he was a great point guard. But you know what he did? He took the pressure off of Russ Smith. If Chris Jones can start playing, maybe not at the level that he played against Kentucky, but somewhere close where he hits a couple of shots a game, he opens up the floor, that allows Russ Smith to work at his full capacity. And that's with open floor and no help defense from the other guard position. But if Chris Jones continues to struggle like he has, then Russ Smith is going to find it very, very difficult to score, to operate at his full capacity. And the reason why is because defenses are going to be focused on him, not on Chris Jones. Okay, they're already focused on him anyway. But they will be even more focused on him. But regardless of Chris Jones' struggles, Luke Hancock is back. That takes a lot of pressure off of Russ Smith. Russ Smith, once again, had more assists than turnovers. His team is perfect whenever he does that. And Montrezl Harrell is a pretty solid low-post player and is only getting better. Kentucky also had a close game in conference. Their game was on the road at Vanderbilt. Once again, the offense much better looking in the second half versus the first half. 30 points in the first half, 41 points in the second. They won this game despite Vanderbilt shooting 50% from the field. UK only had 10 turnovers. Willie Cauley-Stein led the team in scoring. Let those 2 things sink in. First off, Kentucky only has 10 turnovers. That's great. That is great. Their ball security, much improved. Especially from the 1 and 2 guard spots. The Harrison twins. They are getting much more reliable with the ball. When I looked at the box score after watching the game and I realized that Willie Cauley-Stein led the team in scoring, at first I was a little concerned. Because Willie Cauley-Stein is not a natural scorer. And after thinking about it, it still concerns me. Because they are not going to win with Willie Cauley-Stein leading the team in scoring consistently. They are not going to win if they continue to struggle to get out in the open floor, because this team is not a very good half-court offense. They're really not, especially when James Young struggles like he did. Only going 2 of 10 from the field, 1 of 7 from the 3, and only putting up 6 points. But Willie Cauley-Stein has an offensive game. He has an offensive game, and that's something that we could not say last year. He has an offensive game. Okay, he has great touch around the rim. His free throw shot actually looks like a free throw shot. Now, his percentage is still terrible. I get that. But at least it's got an arc. At least it looks like a free throw shot. Because you know what? If your shot looks like the real thing, it can start falling like the real thing. I reference Anthony Davis. At the beginning of his freshman year, his only year at UK, his free throw shot percentage was terrible. But his shot looked pretty good. It just struggled to go in. And then suddenly, bam, something clicked. He couldn't miss hardly. He became one of our best free throw shooters. Shot like 52% in out-of-conference play and 88% in the SEC or something like that. I mean, it was ridiculous, the turnaround. Willie Cauley-Stein is capable of that same turnaround. He has a decent-looking mid-range jumper. Okay, his one time he shot it, it didn't go in. But it looked like a mid-range jumper. It had the form of a mid-range jumper. If something looks like the real thing, it can eventually become the real thing. If you have a shot that looks like a genuine shot, it can eventually go in the rim. So Willie Cauley-Stein is improving. The only big question mark for this team, first off, can the Harrison twins continue to handle the ball in this manner? Now, they may have a few more turnovers. I get that. But can they handle the ball? Can they be reliable ball handlers in addition to being good scorers? That's the first question. Can Julius Randle handle the ball down low? Because he's had his moments where he looks really good handling the ball down low. But man, the guy cannot work out of a double team to save his life at times. And that is a worry. That is a worry. Can Willie Cauley-Stein continue to produce both on the offensive and defensive ends? Can Dakari Johnson continue to provide quality minutes off the bench? Can Dominique Hawkins do the same? Will Willis hit a couple of three-point shots a game? I don't know. This team still has some questions. But slowly but surely, some of those questions have already been answered. And this team is definitely moving forward in the right direction. So, time for some way, way too early predictions. I mentioned I'll get to the Final Four predictions in just a moment. I know I said that about 10 minutes ago, but trust me, we're getting closer. I just like toying with your mind. But first off, some local team predictions. Kentucky and Louisville. We'll start with Louisville. Will they win the American Athletic Conference? The American Athletic Conference is nowhere near as good as what the Big East was. Okay, so the competition is not as good. It's not. That's fairly obvious. They don't have to deal with Villanova in conference, or Georgetown, or Marquette, or Providence, who seems to always give Louisville trouble for some reason. The toughest teams in this conference, Memphis, who Louisville has already lost to, I know that. Cincinnati, they play just a grown man style of basketball. And maybe Houston, Connecticut, if they can ever get consistent. Other than that, the conference is wide open. Wide open for Louisville's taking. Louisville has a couple of players, Luke Hancock, Russ Smith, who played quality minutes on last year's championship team. They know how to win. So given the fact that A, the conference is not that good, and B, Louisville has some returning talent. I know this team isn't as talented as what last year's team was, but I still think they win the American Athletic. It's not going to be easy, but it's not going to be particularly difficult, barring injury. Moving on to Kentucky. Will they win the SEC? Now, I believe that Kentucky has an easier conference to deal with than what Louisville does. Okay, the only real contenders, in my opinion, Florida, because of their great guard play and the ability to just win at home. I mean, they're going to enter the SEC tournament with a very, very good standing, barring injury. And Missouri. But Missouri is, while they are very talented individually, they also struggle to have any kind of consistency. Case in point, they lost at home to Georgia in overtime. So Kentucky, I believe, has the easier conference to deal with. Kentucky has the better team, not just because they won against Louisville, but because their talent is better than what Louisville has. Now, there are still some questions for this Kentucky team, like I posed earlier. Okay, will they continue to improve? If the answer is yes, then hands down, they win this conference because they are the most talented team in this conference. If you honestly think that Florida's front line can handle Julius Randle and Willie Cauley-Stein and Dakari Johnson coming off the bench on a good day, on even a mediocre day, then you are out of your mind. If Julius Randle and Willie Cauley-Stein and Dakari Johnson play even a mediocre game, they will probably, in all likelihood, dominate the front line of Florida and really anybody in this conference. They will. They will. That's fact. Because they are that much better. They are that much more talented. So I think Kentucky also wins their conference. Whoops. Just kick something. But moving on to the moment that you all may or may not have all been waiting for. I hope I've been interesting enough for you to stick around. Who will be in the Final Four as of late Monday night, January 13th? Who, in my opinion, are not necessarily the four best teams right now. That's easy. That's easy. It's Arizona, Wisconsin, Syracuse, Michigan State. Those are the four best teams right now. If the tournament was today, that's the Final Four. But that's not what I'm asking. Who do I believe going into early April? Who do I see in my crystal ball of infinite wisdom? I wish. But who do I see in my crystal ball as the four best teams come March, come April? There's a plethora of teams to choose from. We start at the top. Could Arizona be one of the four? It's possible. It's possible that just like every other year, the West bracket, which they will in all likelihood fall into, is probably going to be weak. Because the only teams ranked in the top 10 on the West Coast are them and San Diego State. And when I say West Coast, I include the states of, that really the western tier of the United States. From I don't know, I hate to make this into a geography class, but the states of California, Oregon, Washington, New Mexico, Arizona, those states Okay, so they will probably, in all likelihood, have a relatively weak bracket. And they play great defense. They play phenomenal defense. They have only given up 70 points twice. 2 times in the entire season. Now, with that said, I have a couple of questions about this team. A couple of questions. Number 1, how consistent is their offense? Number 2, how consistent is their offense? And number 3, how consistent is their offense? Okay, yeah, they've put up 100 points on the season. It was against Fairleigh Dickinson. I don't give a damn. They put up 87 against Rhode Island. Ditto. 91, Long Beach State. Big whoop. They only put up 72 against Duke. And Duke's defense has proven themselves to be awful. Okay, and in games that actually mean anything, they have yet to put up 80 points in one of those games. Against anyone who could be remotely considered a legitimate postseason threat. Their biggest outing against any one of those teams, 79 points at UCLA. Not bad, but if that's your best, then yeah, I have the right to question your offensive capacity. So I have a couple of questions even with the number 1 team, despite the fact that they have an unblemished record. What about, here seems to be a sexy pick, Iowa State. Okay, just lost to Kansas, 77-70. They've lost their last 2. The one before that was Oklahoma on the road. They lost this one at home. They have great scoring. They're 6th in the country, not including this game against Kansas, but 6th in the country with 86.7 points per game. They won their first 14 games to start the year. This team knows how to win. They're in a little bit of a slump now, but they know how to win. Could they be in the Final Four? Could Syracuse be in the Final Four? Great length on the back end of that 2-3 zone. They know how to play defense. They, like Arizona, great defense, only giving up 70 points twice. They were in a dogfight with Boston College. 69-59 was the final score. But they ended up winning. Could they be in the Final Four? Could Wichita State be in the Final Four? They're undefeated. They've only given up 70 points 3 times. But they haven't really beaten anybody. What about Wisconsin? They have a couple of big wins. They've beaten Florida. They've beaten Iowa. They've beaten Illinois. They know how to win close games. 8 of their 16 wins decided by 10 points or less. They're undefeated. What about Oklahoma State? Great guard play. That's something you need in the NCAA tournament. You need great guard play. They average 75 points per game from their guard position or the guard/forward combo position. Their backcourt averages 75 points per game. And they rank 13th in the country with 85 total points per game. Could they be in the Final Four? What about the Kansases and the Kentuckys of this world? The teams that maybe have a bad loss or two, a questionable game here and there, great individual talent. In the case of Kentucky, a very deep team. Could those teams be in the Final Four? What about Louisville, defending NCAA champions? Okay? Michigan State, the preseason number 1. Point is, there are a lot of teams to choose from. In part because there are a lot of good teams out there, and in part because there are a lot of teams that the Miamis, the North Carolinas of this world can beat anybody, can lose to anybody. That's the nature of the beast. There are a lot of brackets, I guarantee you, by the end of the first day, not the first round, the first day, are going to be trashed, burned, and forgotten. That's just how this NCAA tournament is going to be. So to try and predict a Final Four right now is utterly ridiculous. It's like credibility suicide. But yet I'm going to do it. I am going to do it. And these teams are in no particular order of who I think is going to be the number 1 to number 4. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start with the East, who I think is going to be the number 1 team representing that bracket. And that would be the Syracuse Orange. The Syracuse Orange. And there are a couple of reasons for this pick. Number 1, they know how to defend. They know how to defend. Including this game against Boston College, they have given up 60 or fewer points in their last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games. They gave up 62 against Villanova. That was on December 28th. That was the last time they gave up 60 or more points. The last time they gave up 70 or more, you have to go all the way back to November 26th. Cal, 92-81 win. Before that, November 12th, 89-74 win against Fordham. They have great length. They don't necessarily score a lot of points. But I believe that their length in that 2-3 zone, that is going to bother a lot of teams. And unless a team falls into their bracket that just knows how to rip up some three-pointers, then I believe that they are, at least at this point, on the fast track to the Final Four. The team that I think will represent the South, the University of Kentucky. Now, what do you need? First off, if the tournament was today, Kentucky would be a Sweet 16 team, maybe an Elite 8, if they got lucky. So why do I think they'll be a Final Four team? They have all of the ingredients necessary to win it all. Not just to get in the Final Four, but to win it all. They have a reliable front court. Willie Cauley-Stein, great defender. Julius Randle, great rebounder. Those are the things that you need, that you absolutely, at your core, need from your front court. What do you need in your back court? Consistent play, scoring, depth. This team has a lot of depth. They can go 10 deep on anybody. On anybody. They have the necessary ingredients to win it all. Not just to get to the Final Four. I'm not saying they will win it all. I'm not saying they won't. I'm just saying the ingredients are there. So watch out for Kentucky. Michigan State. Midwest. Now, the reason I say Michigan State, I think they are the most balanced team in the league. In the country. Front court to back court balance. You have guard play like Harris and Appling. They average a cumulatively 34.2 points per game. Those two combined, their assist rate to turnover ratio is like 2.5 to 1. That's what you need. You need reliable guard play and scoring from those positions. And then you have the bigs, the combo of Adrian Payne and Dawson. 26.6 points per game. So they can score. This team can spread you out. Okay, so unless they just have a really, really bad off game like they did at home against North Carolina, which is possible, not probable, but it is possible, they could be on the fast track to the Final Four. Plus, they have one of the best coaches, if not the best coach in the game, in Tom Izzo. They have all the necessary ingredients. And finally, perhaps my sketchiest pick, the University of Kansas. They won tonight. Keep in mind this is being recorded on Monday night. They won tonight against Iowa State, at Iowa State. And yes, Kansas has some questionable losses. I get that. I get that losing to Colorado doesn't look that great. I get that losing at home to San Diego State doesn't look that great. I also get that opening up conference play with 3 straight wins, including 2 on the road, 1 at Oklahoma, who's not a bad team, and the other at Iowa State, who's a phenomenal team, and a lot of people's pick to go to the Final Four. To do those things, and then to win at home and dominate a Kansas State team who's pretty good in their own right. All those things add to the fact that they are one of the most talented teams in the country. Andrew Wiggins, Perry Ellis, Joel Embiid, Wayne Selden. I mean, that is a 4-headed monster. That is a scary matchup for any team, and I believe that they will represent the number 1 seed in the West. Now, as always, these picks could change. These picks could change. And I feel like what I might start doing, don't hold me to this, but what I might start doing is I might start updating my Final Four picks every week. Not every show, because I think that would get a little tedious, but every week. I'll decide that, but until then, I look forward to seeing you later on this week, where you will hear from me my playoff predictions, perhaps sprinkle in some NBA news. Maybe there will be another coaching hire. You never know. But we'll see what happens. But until then, I'm Kelly Berry for the Kentucky Kid. Take care, everybody.